Hi, everyone. Welcome to Helpful Tips for Constructing or Renovating Childcare Facilities. I am Diana Gates with the Tribal Childcare Capacity Building Center, and I will be the facilitator this evening. We are excited to have you all join us for this session today during the ACF Indigenous Programs Conference. Before we begin, we will be sharing some instructions on how you can interact during this session. So I'm going to turn it over to our room monitor now.
Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Drina McIntyre and I'll be the ACF room monitor for this workshop. I'd like to share some quick housekeeping items with you before I turn it over to our presenters. First, if you have any questions during the presentation, please submit them in the chat box. The chat box is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you are not familiar. I'll monitor and record these questions for the question and answer session. And if you have questions during the question and answer session, please raise your Zoom hand, and that's located at the bottom of your screen as well, or submit your questions in the chat box. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. We will also provide a survey link for this workshop session in the chat box, and we would really appreciate you being able to capture your feedback and thoughts on this session, which you can do by taking the survey after the workshop. I will provide that link again at the end of the session. The survey link can also be found on the live agenda on the ACF IPC website, along with this session's presentation handouts for download. Finally, as a quick reminder, all workshop sessions are being recorded for on-demand viewing via the 2022 ACF IPC website until April 25th, 2022. Please visit the live agenda page if you'd like to view these recordings after the conference. I'll now turn it over to our ACF workshop presenter, Noelle B., to begin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us at our session. It is Helpful Tips for Constructing or Renovating Childcare Facilities. My name is Noelle B., and I am a Childcare Program Specialist in the Office of Childcare. This afternoon, we have co-presenters, so I'd like to turn it over to Dolores to introduce herself for a moment.
All right, we're on slide 2. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Helpful Tips for Constructing or Renovating Childcare Facilities. I really appreciate everyone joining our session today. We ask that if you are thinking about constructing or doing some type of renovations through the Office of Childcare, there is program instructions as well as information to take. So it would be helpful to have some note taking going on while we're going through this session. I also do have my colleague that will be also presenting with us. Shar?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shar Shank, and I'm the Deputy Project Director for the Tribal Childcare Capacity Building Center. I'm so happy to be a part of this session today, and I look forward to talking with you all soon. I'll pass it back to Noelle.
Well, we would like to learn more about you, and we know that we want to delve into the topics. So we ask that you take a moment and enter your name into the chat box and actually identify your tribal CCDF program. If you want to add a little bit extra, you could let us know if you're even in the process of constructing a facility, but we'll delve into that a little bit later. Next slide, please. We have several objectives we're going to cover this afternoon. We're going to explore construction or major renovation as an option. We're going to assess your community's unique childcare needs, and that could be ways that we're going to identify to build the current supply of childcare. We're going to learn about the technical assistance resources and how to commit and submit your application for funds set aside. And we're going to discuss all of the aspects of pre-planning and some of the processes for completing construction or major renovation. As you're continuing to populate the chat box, we want to talk about one of the scenarios that is in the forefront of our minds, and that childcare is really a national recognition. It's an essential part of COVID-19, And one of our big supports to providing high quality childcare is the CCDF program. This allows tribal governments to provide support for the children and families and assists with their cost of childcare. Next slide, please. Some of the considerations we're going to discuss is we're going to think about in your community, have the childcare centers closed? What are some of the responses from the pandemic? Sometimes the available supply is not there, and you might want to close that gap with constructing a new facility or looking at some of the existing structures in the community. Maybe you want to do some renovation or just change some of the structural qualities. Next slide, please. Part of our construction, our set-aside process is the timeline. For tribes who are looking to submit an application, you need to set aside those funds on or before July 1st. If you are considering to complete an application, we strongly encourage you to reach out to your regional office. They are a huge support throughout this process and will be able to answer any questions you may have. Once you complete the application, if you are direct funded tribes, your funds will be transferred over into the payment management system and it'll be a separate standalone account. If you are a 477 tribe, your funds will not be moved to a different account. Throughout this process, because we know construction does not happen overnight, especially with some of the supply chain issues that we've had as of late, some tribes have found that they may not be able to expend all of their funds. And if that's the case, there are different options. And one of the options is you may want to return those funds. If you decide that that's an option for you, we ask that you contact your regional office and follow the steps to submit a request. They'll be able to walk you through that and help you obtain an approval so you can use those funds for other approved activities. Next slide, please. Throughout the years, there's been a boom in tribal construction, and we'd like to share some of the data we have from just the past 3 fiscal years. In 2019, there were 36 tribes that requested set-aside funds. And of those 36, 14 were 102,477. The following year, in fiscal year 2020, we had 33 tribes to request construction set-aside funds. And of those tribes, 5 of them were 102,477. Last year, with the influx of COVID relief funds, there were 90 tribes who requested set-aside funds. And of those tribes, 22 were 102,477. So as you can imagine, we are going to provide a great deal of support and encouragement to complete the applications and or help tribes determine what's going to be the best course of action moving forward. Next slide, please. Your guide and one of the resources that Dolores mentioned at the start is the program instruction, and that can be found on the ACF website. It is the guide through all of the steps and processes that you will need to accomplish to submit a successful application. We're going to refer back to the program instruction throughout the presentation, so if you'd like to just jot a note down, feel free to do so. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn it over to Dolores, who will start with the Tribal Child Management Systems Framework. Dolores.
Great information, Noelle. Thank you for sharing that. We will now turn this part of the presentation to program planning using the Tribal Child Care Management System Framework. The illustration is the planning process. We'll use the Child Care Management System Framework as a first introduction introduced during the Tribal Management Institute in 2019, and also updated and revisited during the virtual TSTAM in 2020. So that's when that was talked about. Next slide. On the screen, you'll see the visual representation of the Tribal Child Care Management Systems Framework. The visual represents the internal systems that function to ensure you are meeting the need of children and families within your tribal community, as well as meeting the requirements and regulations of your CCDF funding. Next slide. So as we are looking at this framework, if you look at the outer ring, we have leadership and coordination. This is where the CCDF administration or administrators cooperate in coordinating and collaborating with leadership, tribal leadership, and internal and external partners to begin the preliminary planning for minor or major renovation, or even if you are thinking of constructing of a childcare facility. Next slide. Planning is when the CCF administrator provides intentional and strategic planning, developing and designing of the CCF program so that tribal children, families, and communities receive high quality services that meet their unique needs during this planning process. So it is important to gather information and data to make informed decisions that this is something that can be accomplished through one piece is through the community needs assessment. Here on the slide, we have the community assessment could assist with the tribal CCDF plan, and that in itself can also identify long-term goals. Next slide. So one of the most important internal management system is determining how to meet your community's childcare needs. Again, the community needs assessment system. So through the effective community needs assessment system, the CCDF administrator can identify the need for additional or updated childcare facilities. And we do have some guiding questions there on the slide. Some questions you could think about is, have you conducted a community needs assessment? Does our community needs assessment warrant a construction or major renovation application? Next slide. On slide 19, who should be involved in your community needs assessment? Who should all be part of this? So essentially, tribal leadership and CCF administrators determines who will be involved in the community assessment process. Some examples of possible partners are listed on the screen. They include tribal leaders, program staff, providers, parents, and community members. Community-based departments, for example, are like employment and training, housing and other early childhood programs, and your local schools. Another is tribal enrollment office, health and social services department, maybe even the nutritious services department can also be of those individuals or programs that can help in the process of gathering data. We are on slide 20. So next here, we'll talk a little bit about necessary community assessment information. So for a construction or major renovation application, specific information is needed to be gathered during the community assessment. Tribal lead agencies must provide a description of existing childcare facilities located within a 50-mile radius of the proposed facility and that are currently used by the tribal lead agency to carry out their CCDF activities. So including the number of each type of facility, such as maybe your Head Start, early Head Start, home, and centers, and a brief description of each, such as information of the size, the type of structure, the condition, the number of children served, and the ages of children those particular centers are serving. It is recommended that you include a way to gather information as you design and develop your community assessment process. Thanks. So that wraps up a little bit about our community assessment information. Now I'd like to just spotlight some resources here. The resource spotlight here is the Tribal Childcare Development Construction and Major Renovation Frequently Asked Questions. This resource is provided with to you all with answers to many of the questions around construction and major renovation. We also will put this link in the chat box for y'all to have as a quick reference. And I will go ahead and turn this part of the presentation over to Sean.
Shar, you are on mute.
Sorry, I didn't want to unclick for some reason. Thanks. So on this slide, the direct services system is one of the most important systems to involve in your planning. Within this system, you'll determine the number of eligible children currently being served by your CCDF program, children who are on the waiting list possibly, and the need for additional provider settings. Some of the questions you could ask are, do we have the capacity to serve all the children who qualify for our services? Do we have enough money to continue subsidy services while we set aside CCDF funds for construction or major renovation? Grantees can use construction and major renovation as an opportunity to reduce or eliminate wait list or build a supply of care. Another thing to consider during planning is that if there is a need for future expansion, and you should design a facility that takes that into account. So we'll go to the next slide. Another important system is the provider setting system. It includes the ways in which the tribal lead agency supports childcare providers who deliver direct services to eligible children. And thinking about your provider types, you could ask yourself these questions. Have we lost childcare providers as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? Do we have a waiting list for services? Do we currently operate a tribally operated center? If yes, are the facilities large enough to accommodate all of the children who are eligible to receive services? And is the facility safe? If no, would the tribally operated center replace current certificate providers? Or would it accommodate additional children who are eligible? Other considerations around provider setting is how many staff would need to be hired to work at the new facility? And how would you begin recruitment efforts? All of these decisions play a critical role in planning. Next slide. Additional considerations to include in a construction or major renovation application include, are adequate facilities are they not otherwise available? So aren't any other option in your community? Is there a lack of facilities that inhibit the operation of childcare programs in the future? Would the use of CCDF funds for construction or major renovation result in a decrease in the level of childcare services provided? So just please note the CCDF final rule specifies that the requirement can be waived if this decrease is temporary and the grantee demonstrates that construction or renovation will increase the level of direct services or the quality of services. Some grantees are actually considering setting aside fiscal year 2022 funds and utilizing some of the COVID relief funds to manage their operations as they put money aside for construction. So that's one option you could start thinking about. Next slide. The next system within the framework is the health and safety monitoring system, which includes monitoring provider settings. The monitoring reports of your current tribally operated center or your providers could give you valuable information as to the current condition of your child care facilities. You could ask your monitors, based on our monitoring reports, is our current facility safe for children and staff? Data gathered from your monitoring reports could give you the answer you need and be a part of your community assessment. Another very important health and safety question to ask during the planning process is the proposed location for a child care facility safe from environmental hazards? This question will need to be answered by completing an environmental assessment of the proposed location. So let's move to the next slide to talk more about that assessment. An environmental assessment is a part of the complete construction and major renovation application. In the pre-planning stage, this would be an assessment that the CCDF program could consider starting well in advance. Tribal lead agencies must provide an assessment of the impact of the proposed construction or renovation on the human environment, addressing in particular any significant change in land use. So for example, substantial increases in traffic in the surrounding area due to the provision of transportation services. And this is pursuant to the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969. Attachment B of the program instruction provides additional information on these requirements. Tribal lead agencies must provide a report showing the results of tests for environmental hazards present in the facility, groundwater, and soil, or justification why such testing is not necessary. The report or justification is required regardless of whether or not the tribal lead agency is required to submit a complete environmental assessment in accordance with NEPA. Next slide, please. Another important system is the disaster preparedness and response system. This system includes developing and implementing a disaster preparedness and response plan for the tribe service area. During your planning, you may want to consider how your facility will be updated or built to prepare for unknown disasters. The tribal lead agency should consider how the needs of the children, including the need for safe childcare before, during, and after a state of emergency is declared, is maintained when thinking about a building design. Next slide, please. Some design considerations are, will you have exits directly from each classroom? Will you have limited entry from the public? Is the facility structured for emergency situations or disasters? Is the facility accommodated with isolation rooms for children that may become sick? Will we want to add a ventilation system? You could assess your current facilities to identify current design challenges as a part of your community assessment. There may be other considerations based on your geographical locations. Best practice would be to brainstorm with your planning committee on any adjustments to the design that may be needed. Next slide. The communication system involves the ways in which the CCDF administrator communicates effectively with both internal and external partners. This system includes building partnerships through cooperation, coordination, and collaboration, working with tribal leaders, and effectively engaging internal and external partners. How will you communicate with the Office of Child Care of your updates to the child care facility? How will you gather community input for this project? Do all of you know who your tribal or your regional office contacts are? It's important to contact your regional office as soon as you begin to consider a construction or major renovation project. They can provide essential guidance through the process. Next slide. So we wanted to quickly share on the screen the list of the regional office contacts as you think about building the supply of care in your community. We'll wait just a second, and so you can quickly check that out. All right, we'll go to the next slide. We wanted to just provide a quick note about tribes who operate under a Public Law 102-477 consolidated plan. Grantees with approved plans must complete the same application or request in order to use CCDF funds for construction and renovation. There are two key differences related to the application process for grantees who operate under Public Law 102-477. First of all, ACF will notify the U.S. Department of Interior upon approving a 102-477 grantee's construction or renovation application. And secondly, grantees with approved plans under Public Law 102-477 cannot use CCDF funds for construction or renovation until the Department of Interior notifies the grantees that the scope of work has been modified to include the approved construction or renovation application. So just basically want to just remind you that your construction or major renovation application will go directly through your regional office contact. Next slide, please. Moving on to the human resources system within your tribe. Do you have staff capacity to manage a construction or major renovation project? A project of this nature requires a lot of staff input and time, and tribal lead agencies may want to plan on adding additional staff to assist in taking some of the burden off of the CCDF administrator during this period. Or they could hire a consultant to manage more of the day-to-day construction or major renovation activities. If you choose to hire a consultant to assist in the planning process, it's up to the tribe to determine the necessary qualifications of the consultant, keeping in mind that someone with experience in designing and building childcare facilities would be the best practice. Now I'm going to turn this next part over to my colleague Dee.
Thank you, Shara. That was a lot of information, good information. So here we'll talk a little bit about the physical management. Our last internal system is the physical management system. This system will help with planning by providing information on the funding levels, current obligation, and physical policies and procedures. Within the system, you will determine how much money do we have available for construction or renovation projects. Who will manage the set-aside amount for the construction or major renovation? You also need to consider the obligation and liquidation periods and the funds you are planning to set aside. We will talk a little bit more on fiscal consideration in the following slide. Next slide. Pre-planning activities could include preparing application components and developing plans and specification, which is planning cost. A tribal lead agency without prior ACF approval use CCDF funds for reasonable and necessary planning and consultant costs associated with assessing the need for construction or renovation or preparing an application to spend CCDF funds on construction or renovation. So such costs could include the cost of hiring an architect to develop plans and specification. A tribal lead agency may only use CCF funds to pay for the cost of an architect, engineer, or other consultants for a project that is subsequently approved by ACF. If the project later fails to gain ACF approval, the tribal lead agency must pay for the architectural, engineering, or consultant costs using non-CCDF funds. There is no threshold amount on planning costs identified. It will be an amount that the tribal lead agencies decide and should include with the set-aside amount. Once ACF approves this application, a retroactive adjustment must be made to charge these costs to the separate construction and major renovation grant award. More information on planning costs is located under section 5 of the program instruction. Next slide. Tribal cost allocation plan. A cost allocation plan is a document that identifies, tracks, and calculates costs that are spread across the agency. While a budget is a document that plans, categorizes, and tracks CCDF program expenses, many of you may have a current cost allocation in place. Cost allocation plans are an important part of the fiscal management system that assists you in identifying shared costs with another program. So for example, you are sharing a facility with a Head Start program, and you both are responsible for paying for the utilities, the maintenance, snow removal. You could develop a cost allocation plan based on how much of the expenses each grant will incur. In developing a cost allocation plan, identify the service of costs for each of the services to be allocated. Determine a method, a unit for allocating the cost for each services for each program. And then allocate costs are figured out mathematically to the program, so possibly using percentage. Another example is like program utilizes 60% of the square footage of the building, and Head Start utilizes the 40% of the building. you could use those percentages to allocate shared costs to each respective grant. Next slide. So here I'd like to share another resource spotlight is the American Indian Alaska Native Childcare and Development Fund Guide to Financial Management, Grants Administration, and Program Accountability. This guide includes information regarding construction and renovation and related fiscal requirements. So as you begin your journey or you're thinking about starting this new journey as a new CCF administrator, we highly recommend that you print out this guide as a quick resource, and the information in the next few slides can also be found within this guide. Next slide. So now that we have examined all of the inner slices in the third ring, you have considered information from each internal system. You will be ready to give that information to the CCF administrator in the second ring for the CCF program management planning, integrity, and accountability. The CCF administrator will share this information with the planning group, where they will use the information gathered to make an informed choice of moving forward with minor renovation, major renovation, or even constructing a new facility. Next slide. So another resource I'd like to also provide spotlight to is our construction major renovation resource list. The resource can provide you with a link, plenty of links to resources that help you make informed decisions on how you move through this planning process. We will put that also in the chat box for an easy access. All right. So now we'd like to turn our presentation to spotlight one of our tribal CCDF grantees, Fort Peck. Hi, Sunny, are you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Can everyone hear me?
Well, yes, I can hear you. Great. Hi, Sunny, welcome. I'd like to just introduce Sunny. She will be talking a little bit about Fort Peck. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Sunny.
Okay, my name is Sunny Erickson, and I'm the 477 director for the Fort Peck Tribes.
Thank you. Next slide. Sunny was able to share with us a few slides and pictures on their project. So while we're doing that, I will go ahead and ask Sunny some questions. And if you are thinking, as we're going through this portion of our presentation and you might have some questions to ask Sunny, jot those down. And as soon as we're wrapping up this spotlight, you guys all can ask her those questions. So here we go. So can you tell us how you determined that a construction project was necessary within your tribal community?
So we don't have a lot of providers in our community, and people were always asking the program, do you have providers? Do you know who would, would care for our kids? So we did a community needs assessment to show the need in our community.
Great.
And we felt it would serve more kids.
Great. So you did notice that there's additional need for the facility. Great. Thank you, Sunny. So since this is your project, since this is your second application for construction, what did you learn the first time around that helped you develop a successful application?
It was just, I don't know. I don't know. We just, our first application was really quick. It was a fast process because we didn't realize there was a deadline. So the second application, knowing what we're going into was just really helpful in the second application and knowing how to read the program instructions.
So great. You can see that it was a success the first time around. So I guess I'm looking forward to your second application. It should be a lot easier, correct?
Yes, it'll be a lot easier. It was a lot easier.
Great, great. So how long did it take you to complete an application? Do you recall?
Yeah, our first application was done in less than 2 weeks because of the deadline. So we were really, we were really quick on it. We were hoping it was right, and
Great.
it was, so.
So thinking about how quick you made that as a quick turnaround, it sounds to me that you had quite a few members, like stakeholders and partners that really assisted in getting this application done. Am I correct?
Yeah, we had OEP do the Brownsfield and TIPO did the NEPA. The NEPA takes a while because BIA has to come in and inspect too. So that's if you're gonna do an application and you know you wanna do an application, get the NEPA done right away.
Great, thank you for that tip. So on the slide, we did see previously was a modular building. What made you all decide to go with that modular unit?
And we're a really small community, so we don't have the contractors to build something like what we wanted to see. So it was easier for us to reach out and bid out our project to our liking.
Great, thank you. So, so when you decided it was a modular facility, was there a process and a way of designing the facility and a timeline that needs to be met for that?
So our modular took about 6 months to build. We bid it out, and we knew that we had to get it in before winter hit. So they did all the, like our engineers did a lot of the groundwork and stuff so we could get it in right before winter hit. And then they would have the winter to do the inside work.
So actually the timeline was really a good way to identify like weather outside, considering, you know, the sleet, the snow, the rain, and all that work that needed to be done. So I think the timeline was really helpful, correct?
Yes.
Great. So on these slides, we noticed that you have chose a space for school age care. And then the space that is being utilized for anything else other than school age children. I'm sure you've used plenty of those space for multiple purposes. Is that what's happening now, or is that what's being planned as well?
So we want to do an after school space for kids, because we do have a lot of, we have high need for after school care. So we're trying to get something going for after school kids in their own spot and keep the center for the younger kids. But right now it was originally intended to be a lunchroom for like kids to come out of the classroom and eat family style, but we do have the family style eating in the classroom. So right now it's just going to be an after school space and maybe a parent meeting when parents can come sit down.
Great. I think that is a really great strategy and a great innovative way to use a lot of the spaces for dual purposes. So thank you for sharing those pictures. How did you determine the operating costs for the new facility that you have here as within the modular? How did you together with determining all the operating costs?
So the operating costs, like the staff and how much staff we needed.
Right.
Right. So we went with Montana guidelines and to see how many kids were in each room, that's how many staff would need to be in that room without wearing them out. So we have extra staff that kind of rove in areas when our other staff need a break.
Great. I really like these pictures. A lot of them are so beautiful and bright. On the way you even furnished a lot of the classrooms, and you were able to use your CCDF dollars to purchase a lot of this furniture, correct?
Yes.
Great. This is what we, I guess, consider a lot is quality expenses, and I'm glad that you were able to include a lot of quality expenses in enhancing these classrooms and the infant classroom, the toddler classroom. Thank you for sharing those pictures. One of the questions you have is, did you include a playground in your design outside the modular?
Yeah, we're still working on our playground. like I said, we basically opened up in August of this year. And so by the time we were looking for playgrounds and we knew how big our space was, then it was already fall. And we're in the middle of nowhere. So it'll be hopefully within the next couple months, we get our playground in.
Great. So where the modular is located, how did you determine where the location of the new facility was going to be at?
So the current facility was supposed to be out by the tribal building, but we felt that the cost for plumbing was too much. So the tribes actually bought us a space in town that we put the building on. And our second modular, which is going in a town about 30 minutes away, is kind of by the high school, by the police station, by our new community hall. We felt that was the best area for it.
Great. So in looking forward to that second application, is it going to be in the same location?
Oh, the second application will be the one in Wolf Point, the one that's about 30 minutes away. So different town.
Okay. Great. I also seen here in your pictures a beautiful kitchen on the slide. So how many meals have you been serving each day out of that beautiful kitchen?
We serve breakfast, lunch, and 2 snacks. And we serve
All
about
right, that's
between 30 and 40 kids.
wow, that is great. That is awesome. So you are able to create a menu and prepare all this well in advance for the children. I'm so
Yep,
glad
actually you
that's
can see the
there.
menu hanging on the fridge a little bit that she plans out monthly.
Awesome. So thinking about the kitchen, what considerations did you take into account in creating this kitchen? The designer, the architect, or anyone help you and assist you with making that decision?
A little bit. I wish we would have had more countertop space. But no, that was kind of just the set modular and how we kind of wanted it. We wanted more space for like a freezer and fridge, and didn't really take into account the counter space. I guess it was our fault.
Right. I guess at some point there is going to be some room for some little bit of minor renovation, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. We're gonna put we wanted to put one of those metal tables in there for more space. So
Oh, yeah. Yes. So let me ask this question. So do you find it, or would you design it differently if you had that new project? So now that you're thinking about application, are you considering some new things that you didn't think of in this modular that you're going to think about in the other modular or in the new facility?
I think it would just be the kitchen space. I think more cupboards. The rooms work well. The after school space works well. I like the design of this.
Yeah, great. And don't forget storage. We always hear other tribal lead agencies talking about storage. Definitely need storage.
Yeah, we have a pantry next to the pantries, like where how you get down into the crawl space. And then we also have like a washer dryer room that stores stuff. So we have quite a bit.
Great. All right. So let me ask you this question. If you could give anyone that's here in our room one tip, what would that be? If they are considering setting aside funds for construction or even thinking about doing a major renovation?
Reach out to people who've done it before, or reach out to people who are working on it now. When we started it, Blossom Quizno, who was the lady in Belknap, she passed away now, but she was really helpful to us. Reach out to your region. Janet was amazing. And the PI isn't really that scary. I mean, it looks like it is, but if you go question by question, it's not that bad.
Thank you, Sunny. Those are some awesome tips. So now I want to turn back over to our participants that are here with us in our workshop. would you all, or do you know a question that you would like to ask Sunny at this time? I'll open it up and see if anybody has any questions. One thing that I did notice as well was in the earlier picture where the modular is the fencing. That is so beautiful. I like that fencing. It's not a chain link, but I still think that is really nice. It makes it look really fancy. So I really like the fact that you put the nice fencing around that modular. It's very beautiful. All right.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone, any questions. I don't see any in the chat box either. Oh yeah, I do see one here. Sunny, how many staff do you feed daily in addition to your students? Do you feed the staff as well?
We feed all the daycare staff over there. So I think right now there's 9 people over there. We encourage them to eat with the kids, especially in a family style. So they all sit at the table with the kids and they're all eating with the kids.
Right. I also have another question in the chat box is, what did your community needs assessment encompass, or was it a survey?
We did a survey. We handed it out. We were in the community handing it out. We sent it out by email to the schools, to our own, all to the employees here at the tribes.
Thank you. Another question is there a native-owned construction company or any of those native-owned companies that you've been working with, such as vendors? And are you willing?
Yeah, if
Go
anybody
ahead.
has any questions, they're more than welcome to reach out to me. But yeah, there are some native-owned construction companies. We don't have a lot. I think the count right now is maybe 5 of them here. But we didn't have any bid when we were putting the bids out for like the groundwork, the foundation or anything like that.
Great. And another question is, you did mention that you're willing to share if anything, could you put your contact information in the chat box so that a networking of participants can connect with you through email or by phone? All right. Thank you, Sunny.
And Dee,
Well,
it looks
wraps
like
up our tribal.
Dee, it looks like we have one other question from Lenora. Her question was, just for clarification, the center was not required to install a commercial kitchen. Is that correct? I guess she's asking if you were required to have a commercial kitchen in the center, Sunny.
It wasn't, I mean, I guess I don't really know the difference between the commercial kitchen and a regular kitchen. We did use a lot of commercial stuff. We have, yeah, I don't know.
That is a great question. I do know as the tribal subject matter expert around construction major renovation, depending on who provides your health and safety monitoring, possibly your lead agency may be using state licensing. Is an example, if the state license requires, if you're serving so many children above a certain number, your kitchen has to be a more of a conventional facility so that it has a better convenience of preparing a high amount of food, the traffic, and the amount of conventional pieces that need to be added in the kitchen. So it really depends on the licensing of your tribe and what you are considering as a health and safety component and who's monitoring your facility. So that is a really great question. So something to consider if you are constructing or doing a major renovation, you want to connect with who's going to be licensing and monitoring and coming in and doing a review for your facility. So check with them as well and include them as a partner for your facility. So thank you for that question. There is another question here we have in the chat box says, We have 3 years to construct after award is given for construction. What happens if you need more time? Noelle, you want to address that question?
There are different options that a tribe can explore. And one of our strong suggestions is to reach out to the region office and just see how much time you have left and what are some other options for possibly extending that time. It's not always guaranteed. And that's why we say the sooner you know, the better. We encourage you to begin that conversation.
Thank you. Those are some very great questions to be asked. I will now turn this part of we do have a few minutes. I will go ahead and have Noelle complete the next few pieces in our presentation. Noelle?
Dee and Noelle, we have one more question in the chat box. And it's from Craig, and he said, can we start construction and spend federal funds before our plans are approved?
And Craig, the answer is no. You may not begin construction until your full application is approved. We suggest that you either work with your region office and look at the program instruction to see what costs you can incur for planning, but no construction before your application is approved. Okay. So we have a few moments left. We will go through the last slide of construction. And the definition of construction is a child care facility that does not currently exist. And Sunny spoke of the great collaboration they've had with the region office and the opportunity that they've had to address some of the cultural importance and the linguistic specializations in their environment. So we encourage you to use this opportunity to infuse that. Next slide. Another category besides construction is major renovation. And a major renovation is defined as where structural changes are made to the foundation, roof, exterior, load-bearing walls of the facility, or an extension of an area to increase its floor area or space. You can see some pictures of different parts of a project that were classified as major renovation. And again, we encourage you to reach out to your region office to explain your project, and they are actually able to go over pictures and help you brainstorm what the category your project may fall into. Next slide. Sunny spoke at length about a modular unit. The modular unit is a portable structure that's made at another location and moved to a site by the tribal lead agency. There are some programs who have incorporated fantastic designs with modular units, and there is a separate section in the program instruction that is specifically for modular unit construction. Next slide. So now that you are ready to take the next step, you want to conduct the community needs assessments to get a lay of the land to see what your area needs. You want to begin pre-application activities, such as the planning cost, beginning making connections to those internal and external partners, and reaching out to those, like Sunny said, who are actively engaged in construction or who have completed construction. You'll want to take a moment and review the program instruction, reach out to your regional program specialist, and decide which funding source you're going to receive or request the funds to be set aside from, either be it mandatory or discretionary, or even both. You'll also want to begin to review the items listed in the application checklist, and that is attachment D of the program instruction. We'll pause now to see if there are any questions before we turn it over to Dee and close out the session. I don't see any questions.
Okay, there is one question in the chat box.
Okay. let me see.
When is an application considered approved? And when does the 3-year clock start? It's mentioned that the application is approved, the funds are transferred to the payment management system. So that is correct for direct funded tribes. Once the set-aside request is made, those funds are transferred over into the payment management system. When you set aside funds, that is when your clock begins ticking. Make sure I've got everything. And again, this is actually spelled out in the program instruction.
Great. I was just going to say that, Noelle, that a lot of this information speak to those questions. But just to reiterate the fact that just like a previous question is, can we spend our CCDF construction dollars? You have to have an approved application submitted. And once that's approved, then you can begin using those funds. As that is happening, yes, the clock did begin once you got your award letter. But the faster you do your application, get that all submitted, the quicker you can dip into those funds and start getting all those RFPs, bids, vendors, getting them started on a lot of the construction, if that's what you're planning, or the renovation, major renovation. So thank you for those questions. Correct. Craig, so those funds might be available in PMS, but your plan might not yet be approved. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Shar, that it is important that obligation liquidation periods also need to be often a reminder of the timeline as well. So great. Just want to move on to resources. Just want to be respectful of everybody's time. We do have resources spotlights that I just want to quickly mention is the construction of major renovation series tab on our website. We will put that link in our chat here, and that is information on the pre-planning session as well as the application session. We also have information about a lot of resources that are available for our lead agencies, the frequently asked questions, as well as, again, those series that are available for you to take a look at. We also have a tribal child capacity building additional resources that are also available on our website. We'll also put that in our chat box here so that y'all can come over and visit us and see what we have available for our tribal lead agencies. On the next slide, we do have a contact information slide. If you'd like to connect with us and request for some technical assistance through the Tribal Child Care Building Capacity Center, as well as the OCC Regional Contact website, that is also available. We also have a number there and an email for your information so that you could contact us through that. All right. Again, we just want to thank everyone for participating in our session and listening and coming in. Hope this was very good, helpful tips and thinking if you're strategizing for construction and major renovation. I will now turn this back over to our facility to wrap us up. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dee. So we will open the floor again for any last minute questions and pause here for just a few seconds. You can either raise your Zoom hand or share your questions in the chat box. We'll pause here for just a little bit. I see a lot of thank yous for attending. Okay, all right, we'll go ahead and move on and I'll pass this off to Drina, or no, I'm sorry. I guess we're going to wrap up now. So thank you all for attending day one of the 2022 ACF Indigenous Programs Conference. We hope this was both informative and inspiring. Before you depart today, I do want to highlight 2 items. Please continue to visit the 2022 ACF IPC website to explore the virtual exhibitor hall to view ACF grant recipient projects throughout the United States and Pacific Islands. You can find this link in the chat box. Also visit the ACF resources page to access more detailed information on the ACF program offices and partners. Thank you everyone for joining this session.